Johnny, man, thanks for your time today. I just got to say, probably off the record, but I mean, your family and my family go back well, all our lives. I think we've known each other, and so it's nice to be chatting to an Umtali boy again. And you know, Johnny, we still laugh about it, but I think my mom's the sort of highlight of her day was the morning visit to your dad's bakery and grocery at the bottom of town to go and see Costa. That was almost like a daily ritual in Umtali in those days.
And your brother James liked working because we used to have Playboys at the. My dad was the official distributor of Playboy. And right. James would come and serve and read the Playboy under the counter.
Yes. I think your dad used to get them from Mozambique. I think somebody used to bring them.
No. I used to promise you 100 copies, and 100 copies would go literally within, I don't know, 5 days. Okay. So James was always there to read them. But my dad was probably the biggest, what's the name, importer of whiskey and prawns, you know that.
Yes, I know, Johnny Jeepers. I could tell we could talk about stories endlessly about your dad and what went on in Umtali in those days. But you know, just a funny thing. I remember at the height of the war, going into the shop, and there was old Bert Sachs from the Selous Scouts.
Yeah.
In talking to your dad at the back there, at the back of the shop. And now I know what was going on. You know, old Bert wanted to know from your old man about the different routes and how to get things back and forth through Mozambique.
I was there once, and so the smugglers were giving them. I was giving the scouts a lot of info, a lot of intel, absolutely. And
well, and you know, it was another Greek, really. It was Ajax Kirkus, who helped Ronry Daly plot the route for the Nizonia attack.
Ajax knew that area well.
He knew it very well.
Also later, late. These guys all late.
But he did, him and because Ajax was an RSM, and so he knew Ron from the army days, although he was only a reservist. But he did. Ron told me that himself, how it was Ajax who gave him the route in that very few people knew about, and that added to the element of surprise. Just a few weeks ago, I had a really interesting talk to old Ben Kashula from Internal Affairs. He was a DC, and it was a reminder, of how hard those guys were working in very difficult circumstances, kind of behind the scenes, and the same applies to the Guard Force guys.
So we got onto the trucks and we went to Chekarubi, which was INTAF's training grounds, okay? And Guard Force had sort of seconded quite a big area. So it wasn't, it was INTAF prisons, okay? The Chekarubi prison complex. Where is it? Sort of northeast, okay, of Salisbury.
Mm-hmm.
And there was about It was about 100 of us. Okay, so Guard Force were establishing their two battalions, and obviously farm protection was increasing. So I got into the unit, and as I said, I was captain of the first team soccer. I used to play a lot of football. So I was quite fit. My only problem was my eyes. I was wearing glasses, and so I passed a couple of us went through the training program, successfully. The one point I want to make, Guard Force brought a lot of ex-RLI guys, including, what's his name?
Robin Tom.
Robin Tom. Yeah, Robin Tom was a commandant, which is a major, and he was responsible for bringing this training. A lot of RLI guys. Okay, there was a guy by the name of Atkinson, who was RSM.
Yes.
And okay, and there were a couple of other guys. So Guard Force became very much from a training doctrine point of view, very online driven, very aggressive. The SOC course was I remember seeing some RLI guys coming onto our stock course, which was tops apparently. Then I got selected to do the officers course, not in Gwelo, but in Guard Force. So they put together their own officers training program.
Okay.
And so I was commissioned in, when was it, towards the end of June as a junior commandant, which is the second lieutenant. And then I was sent off to Octangen to run one of the company bomb protection, which was Plantry, Delta 2. So I was made OC of Delta 2 in Octangen. And the base was just outside Bulawayo called Army Rooms. Yeah, I stayed there until I was demobbed in 31st of January 1980.
Johnny, just let's go back to the doctrine. What was the Guard Force? Explain to us the role, where you guys fitted into the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, okay. Luckily, there weren't many officers. Okay, so the guy that ran the tangent operation for farm protection was the guy by the name of Ivan Moore. Okay, he was ex-RAF. Then he went to the Foreign Legion. And so when you look at the Guard Force upper command, these were all retired guys, and all pretty senior, all seen combat. Okay, so there was no, they were pretty tough guys, but all retired.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Godwin used to, Brigadier Godwin, who was the commander of Guard Force, came out, I used to sit with him and have dinners. Okay, he would come at least every second month. So I got quite close to him, and at dinner, a lot of stuff that I'll be telling you is from Godwin's mouth. Okay,
Okay.
I was right at the top in terms of understanding what took place. The original intention of Guard Force was to run the PVs, the protected villages. Okay, and they were quite extensive. I'm not. There must have been about 40, 50 PVs around the country. At the end of the day, they became unsuccessful. A lot of them were actually operating from these
inside the camps.
Yeah. And it's just that's the nature of it. There was 20 guards. There was an old guy. My late dad, I remember going and on some of, he was called up every 6 months. He had to go and do 2-3 weeks, and he was a commander of one of these keeps. So there wasn't enough. There was certainly not enough command and troops to make these things successful.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, what happened? One of the strategies of Zonder's and Zebra was to take now. Start attacking the farms, okay, and that in essence became the genesis of Guard Force. Was to put an organization, train guys, and put them to protect the farms, and it was very successful, believe it or not. I think that lady you interviewed, I think she got attached, and she was talking about the 2 Guard Force guys that responded. Okay, there were a lot of incidents where these 2 guys or 3 guys in some instances. Would provide firepower. Okay, so the doctrine was successful. Then out of that came that there wasn't enough battalions to fight, particularly in Matoke area. So Guard Force expanded from guarding farms moving into a battalion type of operation in North Hurricane. Okay. So the 1st battalion was established to put feet on the ground. They weren't very successful, and the reason for that, they didn't have enough equipment. Mm-hmm. Certainly, the intelligence wasn't there to assist them, and certainly there was no availability of fire force. But anyway, they had enough men on the ground to have some effect. But again, at the end of the day, it became ineffective, and those guys moved to Rutenga to look after the railway line, which became the other target of Zanla. Mm-hmm. But farm protection was always there. So one of the questions I asked God, why did we separate? Why wasn't Guard Force incorporated in the army? And the reason for that was he said that the army thought the organization become too big and we better off in its separate organization. It also assisted Guard Force to bring in a lot of ex-retired officers, which the army would never have accepted. Mm-hmm. And as a result, it became the fourth armed division of Rhodesian forces.
Yes.
Right. So it was purely to bring in retired officers, to take out guys that had finished their services with, I'm talking about the regulars, and to bring them into another organization which could make them an offer. That's why there were a lot of ex-RLI guys, a lot of Rhodesian African Rifles. And eventually, towards October, we started seeing a lot of English, British guys coming into the unit. Okay, and one of them was a guy called Watkins. He was Commodore, Air Force Commodore of the UK. Yeah, pretty senior guys, okay, and all very experienced. So when you look at the high echelon of Guard Force, there was certainly no lack of talent. Our challenge became from the sort of middle ranks, junior officer ranks, and certainly NCOs. There weren't enough good NCOs in the organization, and it's purely because of time. So from what 76 to 79, it became 2,000 men. It became 2,000 to about 7,000. So it's 5,000 guys coming into the ranks. And that's what I said to you guys. We just didn't have the talent to manage this unit fast enough to come and make it effective. And obviously, the other problem was a lack of equipment, a lack of vehicles. But anyway, putting 7,000 guys in the ground had some impact. Certainly had some impact.
Johnny, what was your daily task at Plumtree? Were you in one of the protected villages and working from there?
So Guard Force was very much structured in a battalion type organization, battalions or companies. So I was in charge of the one company, and my company, Delta 2, we deployed at least 2 guards on a farm. Okay. So I was responsible about 40 farms. 40 farms is about 80, 90 guys on those farms. So I used to spend about 10 days on the farms, going around, picking up guys, putting new guys on board, disciplinary issues, and certainly those guys came back, would go on R&R, and the guys that came back from R&R, we would train them. So very much visiting the farms and training back at base. And obviously all the administration around that, including payroll.
Johnny, there's no doubt you guys brought a lot of comfort and security to a lot of farmers. In fact, I did a talk a little while ago with one of the standers from the Teki Hills, and the Guard Force were all they had, really. But that was the only protection that they had was the Guard Force, and I think one of the Guard Force guys was killed in one of the ambushes that they suffered on the ranch down there.
No, I was under a lot of pressure from the farmers to increase increase it from 2 to 3. Okay, and so I had to go back, and because they were quite strict that farmers to get 2 guys. Okay, a maximum of 2, with an exception of getting a 3rd guy. But there was never 1 guy, at least 2 guys. And yes, when you look at military doctrine, when you got 2 guys with G3s, okay, it's a 20% increase in firepower. So it gave the farmers some form of comfort. So in many cases they would go and open the gate. That was one of the vulnerable. It's one of the times if the Greeks would attack, they would attack when the guys would open the gates, and certainly when they're coming back, open the gates, and then obviously escort the farmers. So it was an increase in firepower. So yes, it was effective. Ideally, we would probably have 3 or 4 guys on some of the farms. I think one ranch we had about 5 guys there. And yes, they were effective. Absolutely.
And would you run these teams? Would they report to you and just let you know everything was okay, or if there'd been an incident?
Yes, we'd get incident reports, but it was quite clear that they report to the farmer. Okay, and farmers were given strict rules, because some farmers try to exploit them. And we said to them, these guys are there to protect you. They would try to get them to do other duties. So there were some issues there, and some nasty ones, but most of them were resolved. And yes, it was effective. So 10 days I was, and my area was massive. I don't know if you know the Plumtree area, from Marula right down to Plumtree. So if you look at the The length of the thing was about 150 kilometers, 150 kilometers deep. If you look at it from Bulawayo, what's the north going south, and about 100 kilometers going west to east to west. Okay, and I had a Land Rover. I had 2 trucks. We had a Rhino that eventually broke. So that was my resources. And we had a Bren gun, a good old 303 Bren gun, super accurate, and a mortar, and a 60 millimeter mortar, those handheld mortars. So that was my arsenal. We were looking at creating a strike force. And when we started getting the resources, we started working around that, which was around October, November. By that stage, we had the peace, we had Lord Soames, and that sort of thing fell away. And obviously, by December, January, the whole rationale of God Force fell away. But yes, as farm protection, it was quite effective, and we had all the five operational areas. We had God Force Army element there.
Johnny, just talk us through the keeps, the protected villages, how they were constructed and how they were managed and run, and just the whole thinking behind the protected village concept and how it actually played out in the field.
Okay, I don't have what I can tell you. It was modeled very much around Malay. Malay had a very important part in the regional army doctrine and counterinsurgency, born warfare, and the Americans, the Americans had their protected keeps. So this protected villages are very much a part of any doctrine in counterinsurgency to get the population out from tangling with the guerrillas, as the books would say. So they originally started with INTAF, and as I said, this became too big for them. And God Force, the origin of God Force, was to take over the protected villages. I can't say much more than that because I wasn't really involved there. Okay, I was just too busy and there was no PVs, there was no protection villages in Tangent in Bulawayo. Okay,
but Johnny, just from your knowledge, how did it work? Everybody was in at night. Did they do a roll call? How did they try and manage these people that they were supposed to be protecting?
I'm a student of history, military history. When you try to organize 2,000 people, and you got most of these places had between 20, 30 guards, 1 or 2 white guys managing them. They were ineffective. Okay, the fencing was probably let's say these were 400 meters by 400. What's that? So these were large areas to maintain. Okay, and very easy targets to attack. At the end of the day, they didn't even bother. I mean, they just cut holes in the fence, and they were doing all sorts of things with the local villagers in the keeps. So, in the day, they became ineffective.
Johnny, there were some morale problems that crept in amongst the whites, maybe the blacks too. Were there issues with general behavior?
Yeah. So being single, we had 4 whites in. I shouldn't use the word whites, but put it officers and NCO ranks where I was, Commt Ruins. And it was a farm. Commt Ruins is a very famous archaeological site outside Bulawayo, towards Plumtree. So most of the white guys would go back home. So there was one officer, an admin officer. Colonel Moore, Commandant Moore would stay in Bulawayo, and the other 2 would go off. So I would be stuck. I would be stuck at the camp. That was one of my responsibilities. So the disciplinary problems was one of drinking. Okay, everyone drank. Okay, except for me. Everyone drank. So there was discipline with drinking. One of the points I want to make, there were a lot of problems with, and one of the unsung heroes of the war were the women. There were the women that stayed at home and had to deal with their husbands. Okay, mostly would come back drunk. There were 2 issues where I had to go and literally, I'd get a call and saying that my husband is beating me up, and I had to go drive about 30 kilometers and go and deal with it. So that was towards November, December, when I was more in the camp. So drinking was a problem right across the board. and abuses that, particularly amongst the white guys with their wives. A lot of divorces. When I was there, the 5 or 6 guys, I think there were 3 divorces. So yes, there was certainly a morale problem with the white guys and their relationships with their wives and spouses. And you know, so those are one of the things I picked up towards the end. One of the disturbing things I picked up. The black guys was drinking, a lot of dacha. So the problem was getting up towards the end, getting them up early in the morning. So I got involved in a lot of that nonsense, trying to sort it out. Wasn't pleasant.
It must have been very difficult. A big sort of unwieldy organization, probably not morale, not very high. Given a difficult job, under-equipped, not an easy task, I'm sure.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't pleasant. But then I started to hate it.
Johnny, and then along comes the ceasefire. Did you then interact with the monitoring force people?
Yeah, I got involved. I used to go to Jock Tangent once a week at Brady Barrack. But yeah, we weren't involved per se on those camps that we went to take these guys in.
The assembly points.
Yeah, I wasn't involved. There was nothing in Plumtree. Okay. And Plumtree, one of the big benefits of Plumtree was probably one of the tamest areas because we bordered along Botswana. So the infiltration was very, very limited. Okay. Mm-hmm. The bigger challenges with it was the guys in Plumtree and certainly the guys in towards South Gwanda.
Gwanda, Beitbridge, yes.
Those were very hot areas, okay. And the guy that managed Gwanda was an quite a senior ex-cop, an old guy. So he did pretty well there. And the guys up north was also reasonably hot, okay. When I'm saying hot, attacks on the farms were a lot more frequent, or attempts to attack the farms.
Johnny, just to talk a bit about the farm attacks that you were involved in that took place on your watch.
Yeah, look, you know, being back in base, you get the sit up in the next morning, we got attacked, okay. There was obviously very little we could do, okay. So each farming area would have their reaction force, mostly driven by the police. Partly was a very important part in reacting to farmer attacks.
Yes.
Yeah. So I used to get after the fact, would go there and see what happened, how effective the guards were. You know, we certainly give advice in terms of you know, farms in Rhodesia the problem with farms in Rhodesia, they were very easy targets. So fencing was obviously played a very important part. Okay. Mm-hmm. No farmstead was designed to be attacked. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's limited funds to make these places more secure. And the biggest challenge for farmers wasn't being attacked in their house. They were being was getting into that vehicle and leaving the farmstead and certainly coming back. Mm-hmm. So that was always I'd say the highest risk area for farmers would be experienced to.
Ambushes and landmines.
Ambushes, yeah. Landmines was pretty. There weren't many landmines. There was no reported landmines in my area. Okay, it's just the sheer time it takes to dig up a hole and put a mine or put a substantial mine, and the farmers will pick it up pretty quickly. So we didn't have any challenges in roads being mined.
Okay, but ambushes and actual
ambushes, yeah.
And
having two guards on either side of the vehicle, was certainly effective. Certainly effective.
Johnny, your relationship with Brigadier Godwin, he was very well thought of, I gather.
Well, so when you look at the genesis of Guard Force, it was very much an RAR. So the high command was ex-Regional African Rifles. A lot of the RSMs and CSMs were ex-RAR guys. So from a manning point of view, in terms of the black soldiers, RAR. From training, RLI. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a genesis of those two units that created what we call Guard Force. yeah, Godwin was a great guy, tall, big. I had at least 3 or 4 dinners. Well, yeah, I'd say 4 dinners with him. When he'd come into the area, we'd all get together. And because Commandant, like me, I used to sit on his right-hand side and Godwin sitting on his left-hand side. So I was right opposite him. And I'd ask all these questions and he would have to answer them. A great guy. And I knew his sons. The sons were doing. They were doing last year in 1979. He had 2 sons in the School of Infantry. I went and did a special course, and I met these 2 sons there at Guela School of Infantry. But yeah, he was a soldier's man, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And took his job very seriously. He recognized the bad reputation. He was doing everything he could do to raise the standards of Guard Force. And don't forget, the third element of Guard Force were the battalions that were protecting the Roma lines. Okay, yes. It was a serious part of Guard Force.
Right. And Johnny, your interaction with internal affairs, did you work with the district commissioners, district officers?
No. The interaction there would have been guys in the protected villages. Okay, so they always had a secondment of guys in the protected villages. But let me come to their defense. Internal affairs provided a major element of intelligence. Okay, because they knew everybody in that area, and without internal affairs, I think the Sleuth Scouts would have struggled. That's my opinion. They were on the ground. They knew everybody.
The internal affairs guys.
Yeah.
There was a lot of intelligence there that might have been missed.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I think Sleuth Scouts would have used a lot of their registries. They recorded all the births, deaths. So one of the big advantages in Rhodesia from an intelligence point of view, and I tell you this because, as I said, I do read a lot on history. I do read a lot about military strategy. Okay, I think if we didn't have a good internal affairs element, I think a lot of that intelligence would have been more difficult. So when Sleuth Scouts went into the area, they had a pretty good understanding of the population.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so. I think internal affairs were a remarkable organization, incredibly well organized and very well informed.
And well run, yeah. And I think that's one element. On the one message, being a junior officer and interacting officers, one of the big advantages of the Rhodesian Armed Forces, we were well led, absolutely. From Air Force, Army, INTAF, Air Force, and police. Don't forget, police was a major element of counterinsurgency.
Johnny, as a student of military history and a man with personal experience, looking back, what would you have done differently if you'd been in a position to make some of the big decisions?
Hannes, you want the truth? We had no chance. The area was just too vast. Okay. I'm reading now. I'm following the military. What's happening in Ukraine? The Russians are lobbing 50,000 artillery pieces a day. 50,000. Ukrainians are responding back with 5,000. Okay. When you look at Vietnam, the regiment. The airborne regiment was 100 helicopters. I think at most we had 50 helicopters.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you look at Vietnam, Vietnam's half the size of Rhodesia. So we just wasn't enough for us. Zonlea and Zipra, between them, they had 25,000 guys. A lot of them weren't very good. Against we had 7,000. Rhodesian Army was about 4,000. It's 11. East was 500. So there's 25 versus 12,000. We had no chance. I remember driving down those roads and I say, shit, there's nothing here. But yeah, we put up a pretty good fight. I think we were really effective on what we had. Absolutely.
No, I think that's right. I think if you look at you're quite right. Just you look at the numbers and it does look a bit hopeless, but somehow we did manage to prevail for a lot longer than anybody thought we would. And as you say, it wasn't only the numbers; it was the lack of resources that really caught up with us towards the
logistics. That's the logistics. We don't have enough helicopters, really. I remember when I went to Guerra, we were meant to get into more observations. Okay, so bringing in Fire Force, and the Air Force guys said we just don't have enough helicopters, and you don't have to be a student of military history to understand that. And those attempts to bring in those ex-Israeli helicopters was a disaster. We meant to get 24, we got 12, I think, or 11. It wasn't enough. Just wasn't enough.
No, that's there's a story within that story there. There was a lot of skullduggery, and as you know, the ones that arrived, I think, were in pretty bad shape.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that wasn't that. Yeah, it was unfortunate that those choppers didn't come through in the numbers that were expected. It was quite a key issue at that time because they were so desperately needed.
Yeah, another element I like to bring up is involvement. I saw at the jocks, I used to see quite a few South Africans at the back, and you could recognize them. They're tall, tanned, and sort of brand new Rhodesian camouflage. Okay, so they had a magic element in Fire Force in Gwanda. I think you've reported that.
Yeah.
So that's all very true. Okay, and very good, absolutely very good. And I've met a couple of here in South Africa. I met a couple of D Squadron guys, spoken to them.
Okay.
And yes, and I think we didn't have enough of them. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, they made a hell of an impact in the short time that they were in that area. And one of the reasons I think was, they had Pumas, and our enemy had never engaged anybody that in those numbers. One helicopter lands, and a lot more people get out of it than out of an Alouette. And I think that took them by surprise.
Yeah, plus, they were faster, what was it, about 15 guys? So 15 guys is what? It's about 4 sticks, okay? So 4 sticks in a helicopter, so yes, the elements weren't sufficient. I think it was one of the other problems in terms of getting numbers into the ground. And looking back, the other point I want to make, there were quite a few guys from Australia that were being seconded into the battalions. There was a guy called Joe Flanagan, quite a character. There was an Israeli that came with us. So we were getting a lot of this talent coming in, but we just never had the resources to make them effective. Okay, was the other challenge. In terms of the G3, I don't know why people criticize. It was a pretty good rifle. Okay, never really jammed. Its blowback action was a lot more effective than the FN. Good experiences with that. The Bren gun was like the MG, heavy but very accurate. Certainly worked. So looking back, farm protection played a significant role in keeping farmers where they were, which was very important. If farmers started leaving the land,
yes,
it would have been a major problem. So Golf Course was very successful there. In terms of looking after the Roman lines, they kept those Roman lines pretty. There used to be attacks on those lines, but kept those lines open.
Yes.
Village protection failed at the end of the day, particularly in the Matoka area. We lost Matoka, and that I remember Godwin telling us that Matoka, that whole area became a lost cause, and in fact, it left there. It was only this SAS that could go in and make any difference. And probably the safest area was Guerra. It was Operation. What is Guerra? Operation
Grapple, I think.
Yeah.
Grapple. I might have been. I'm not sure.
And the only reason why it was safe because it was right in the middle of away from the borders. And to some extent, Plantry, because bordering Botswana. Otherwise, everything else was difficult. Very difficult.
Yeah, the old Khama, Seretse Khama in Botswana, he was quite a reluctant participant in that war. He'd actually met Ian Smith, and he kind of had a less radical view of the whole situation than Samora Michel and Kawunda. And so that's one of the reasons why I think that side of the country was relatively quiet. Khama didn't want to go overboard with big bases and get more. And he was, as I say, he was a a bit of a reluctant participant in the whole conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think driven by the fact, diamond cells and strong influence with Anglo-American, they don't want to disrupt that commercial business model. And even if they open up in philanthropy, I think Zipper had reached its zenith in terms of man, but I don't forget these guys also had serious constraints in terms of getting recruits, which they did quite successfully to get 25,000 over the border plus. I think their challenge was, and I think thanks to the SS and Salute Scouts, they could never really organize into anything significant. When you look at the largest group, and I used to see this in the SITRIPs, it was 120, which is effectively what? A company, undersized company. They could never assemble more than a company force. And I think a lot of that is due to the how effective the fire force was, and certainly how effective the SAS were in Mozambique. But our biggest challenge in these camps, they were too close to our border, and there was never, it's one thing going in and attacking them, but next day or 2 days later, you back in your helicopters, and these guys, they just reorganize, which was always going to be a problem. There was not enough troops to make those places move them further back.
Yeah, and the enemy had massive support. When you think about it, I mean, the Soviets were very committed, the Chinese were very committed, and let's face it, the Western world, the Swedes, the Scandinavians, the Europeans were pouring in money and and other forms of non-lethal support. So there was no end of support for the enemy, and their resources were a lot greater than ours.
Yes, but to credit to the regional army, we never allowed them to attack us at more than a company size. Okay, and if you look at the history of Vietnam, Vietnamese North Vietnamese could organize literally up to battalion attacks on the American forces. That never happened in Rhodesia. Okay, so most we were dealing with was 100 guys, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest incursions took place towards the end around north of you, up at Victoria Falls, where Zipper came across in very big numbers, and there were those celebrated battles with Zipper and the Grey Scouts, and the Air Force got involved. But that's about as big as the set piece battles got in Rhodesia.
Yeah, and also where we came from, places like Moranti, were running on 100 group sizes. And that was towards the end. And yes, thanks to Fire Force had a major element in keeping that size relatively low, and obviously the impact of SAS in disrupting large movements from Mozambique.
Johnny, just before we close, a bit of an anecdotal story, but I came to do the follow-up with Derek Lane, who'd come from National Parks, when the bridge, I think it was the Davuli Bridge, was attacked. And
right.
Your old man was one of the bright lights or whatever guarding the bridge. Did he ever tell you that? Shame, man. I mean, they were hammered that night. And we were at Nyanyadzi, and they were running out of ammo, I think. And we went that night to bail them out. And your old man was there. He was one of the, I think there were 4 of them. Was Peace Reserve or Guard Force? Was Peace Reserve?
No, Rhodesian Defence Unit.
Oh, yes. They were all Umtali guys, reservists from Umtali. And your dad was one of them. And then we did the follow-up from there. And then into Buhera and Jeepers did we walk into a lot of trouble in that place. That was another I think it was a virtually liberated area. We got a hammering there.
Yeah.
But Johnny,
sorry. So what's it? RDR, Rhodesian Defence Unit, were around. I did see them, mostly coloureds and Indians, and they were deployed. Their job was to look after the bridges, the big ones.
Johnny, thanks very much for your time.
Yes,
very interesting. Very useful, and thanks, man. It's one of the areas that we haven't really covered. So really good to have your input and fill in that bit of a gap in the war stories.
Yeah, no, I admire all the guys that come to your show. These are the guys that made it happen. I call it the spear, the front end, but yeah, there was a big back end. And I think that was one of the successes. I think it's one of the stories you need to be able to bring more guys to discuss what happened at the back end of
Yeah.
what made Regional Army so effective.
Well, Johnny, well done. We all
Thanks.
tried in our funny little ways. And as you say, I think we did put up quite a good fight. It's just a pity it ended like it did.
Yeah, there was no other way, unfortunately, no other way. And to all credit, no guerrilla army came and captured any town. I think that gave us a very favorable settlement. I think if Mugabe had captured one of the towns like Tali and a couple of these towns, it would probably change the whole dynamic. So we did pretty well. We did pretty well. Thanks, Hannes. I hope it was useful. But
very useful and really nice catching up with you, Johnny. And I'll be in touch.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, Johnny.